in front of them by the first Tuesday in June, because the status with the state, our qualified local government status, is good through June 30th. So that's the timeline in a nutshell, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
So the earliest we would see this back would be 40 days from the date.
And then the posting of an agenda. So it would probably be, once we get it to the mayor and commission for their vote in February, sending it the week after that, it would be on the April-May cycle.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment? Or quick comments. I feel like the work program is the deep thing here, and I'm very satisfied with this. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. I'm voting yes to send this forward, and I'll make a motion. The entire document does reflect the sort of strange place we found ourselves in 5 years ago of trying to move a lot of community activity into this one document. So I guess I'll just say from that point, I really look forward to the 5 years from now when, well, all the work that goes on between now and 5 years from now, to have a comprehensive plan that where I can look at the work program and map it back to the earlier parts of the document. It's not easy for me to do that right now.
Right.
So this is no criticism of staff or the committee that helped drive this forward. I just do think we were in a strange place 5 years ago. And I mean, from a planning perspective, I think ultimately it was a good thing because, you know, it was tied up with Envision Athens, and we did get tons more public input into, you know, all aspects of our civic life together. But I think staff was asked to do something that was sort of like, can you do this really quickly? And you've never done this before. And you know, there are little pieces in the plan, like page 26E. I think that comment probably needed to be edited out. It's not a policy. I mean, I'm sorry I didn't send these to you before December 22nd. Yeah. But I mean, for the most part, I can read through this, but what's extremely important to me are the last few pages where we've got the work plan. And I feel very confident about that and look forward to, you know, working with the community to bring that forward. So that's all.
Very good point on page 26. Thank you.
Sorry, I bring that up.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
No, that's great. That's good.
I think Alice's comment sort of embodied the challenge that the committee had, that there was just that things that felt and looked like verbatim public comment were put in there under the word policy in a way that didn't make sense. But I think we didn't really have the scope or authorization to make a change like that, even though.
Or even the time.
Yeah, right. So anyway, it's what you're saying is that you picked up exactly on what was kind of tricky.
I had that same question. Where did the authorization come from?
As far as the process, or?
Yeah, I mean, it says in here that you were working on it for a year, but it's really not very good. I mean, and did you change anything?
Well, so that's just it. With our comprehensive planning processes, a year is not enough time. We're more used to a 24-month, 2.5-year process for our comprehensive plans. And we weren't afforded that opportunity to do it that way.
But did you feel authorized to change?
Not much. So what we felt authorized to change was less about the substance of the recommendations, which is Sarah's point. The content of the wording, we could try to make clearer. We were updating data because we had 2018 data. We didn't have 2020 census data. We were updating activities that the mayor and commission have authorized to take place. Those have been folded in. But that's about it. So it needed, the only changes we could make here were changes of fact and changes that had been vetted in a public process and authorized and adopted by the mayor and commission. So that really narrowed the content that could be changed as part of the steering committee's work. When we do comprehensive planning, we don't hog tie ourselves like that normally. But in this instance, calendars, staff, all sorts of things kind of conspired to make this process an update of data only and a scrubbing of content for really super awkward things, although what you've done is awkward. That's super awkward. But there was a lot of awkward stuff in there, and I think the steering committee can attest to that. So we spent a lot of time trying to fix things that were inspired by a process that is now outdated. If I could paint the picture, what we were trying to do is take the engine that created a lot of this content, which was Envision Athens. It was a moment in time. And so what we were trying to do is detach from that moment in time and then bring in data and activity that's happened since to make it a current document with the substance of the spirit of the 2018 document. And that makes for a weird thing. There's no doubt about it. And that's why we're really sincere about taking this next 5 years and getting the authorization, which we already have from the Mayor and Commission, to have the time to do the right job with the 2028 version, which we're not waiting to that point. We're already starting now to get the content for that put together. So that's more how Athens does comprehensive planning.
Great, yeah, I think we need a good plan that reflects well on Athens, because this one certainly doesn't. There's some good concepts in here, obviously, but yeah, I'm just curious, some of the organization, like, yeah, like who decided what was a need or opportunity or a goal? Because I think even someone, or did the state already, sorry, I'm all over the place. Like there are a lot of strategies that are written as goals, action items, objectives, ideas. It's all kind of mixed.
That's what we were dealing with in 2018.
Okay.
And again, afforded.
Kind of challenging, but maybe helpful to do this on the heels of that. But then when I read the document, I'm like, oh, that process was better than that reflects. But I think what we were so limited on this committee of what we could update that even because the concept of like, well, that's not really a goal, that's an objective, or that's not a strategy, that's a policy. We talked about that a lot and didn't have a ton of ability to move that around too much.
And the reason why is there's no good way to know when to stop. So it's not, we were reading this and seeing what you're seeing.
Okay, good.
If we were to go make a change, we didn't have the mandate nor the time to go back and validate that with the public in a meaningful way. So we had to work with what had been validated by the public through that process and try to bring it into today's terms. And so it was a bit of a balancing act. Again, not how we would do comprehensive planning when we're properly set up to do it.
Very well. You look forward to a better product. Some of it, like the very introduction just seemed a little weird. Preparation of the 2023 plan began January 2022. Throughout this time, planning department staff have led an effort always meant to be driven by the public through various means of input. Yeah, I guess this isn't the time to be picky, but it's just kind of weird. Like, because we didn't have a robust public input this past year. We checked the boxes for the state. I don't know, I maybe just tweak some of this writing so it seems a little.
If you have edits, it's not too late.
Okay,
I'm sending it to
good.
you. So
For my own peace of mind.
I think maybe the key to this is that it's not like a full scale rewrite.
Definitely.
So there's a lot of things that we would change if we had the 3 to 4 years in advance, like we will for the next one.
I'm saying it seems like it's saying it's something that it's not. Just lines like that. But on that note, I absolutely really support and look forward to a robust process for next time that's driven by data and expertise and lots of great input.
And I'll say this too, the design of that process is going to include all of you and beyond. So the notion of a 5-person steering committee for doing a comprehensive plan, that's not how we're designing this process to come. It's not how we've done processes in the past. This is what the hand we were dealt. So you will have front end, all of you will have front end input, point input, and all the input you ever want in this next process.
Great. Got a comment from Matt and then Sarah.
So, yeah, I guess I'll just keep it brief. I just have one thing I wanted to point out. I share some comments, but on page 79, item 5 in the program, evaluate the zoning code to ensure a balance of housing types are constructed and available. And that's listed as not a planning department job, but as an economic development department job, which surprised me. Not that we wouldn't want economic development input too, but I would expect that y'all would be able, right, in that process.
Yeah.
Just as you are on some other related stuff over the next several pages about like parking minimums and minimum dwelling size regulations and so on. So maybe that's just a typo. I assume that was not an intentional application.
No, that was not a purposeful. In fact, I want to say that was written totally differently in previous iterations. So, right. That should say planning, and we will change that.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a quick, hopefully, question about page 50. Data related to ownership, residential parcel ownership type, both from the tax assessors. Have y'all done any kind of gathering of information as to how accurate the tax assessor's records are in this regard?
To ownership?
To the residential, to the ownership, where the residential, where the owners live. I'm assuming you get it from the mailing address that's listed with the tax assessor's records?
Yeah, we corroborate that against the homestead exemption data.
So this is,
We're on page 48, 49, right?
Yeah.
I am on page 50. I'm on the table on page 50. Okay, so this is,
I think our things are numbered.
I have a different,
Version in your packet for this.
this must be the one that you told me like a week before. Yep, okay.
So this is 48.
It's okay. I'm assuming that the numbers have not changed significantly. Yep, it's on page 49. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I just want to put out there, and this is not going to impact whether I think this should be sent on to the state or anything. I just want to put it out there. I've been doing some research on my own as to where are these owners from. And I just started with my neighborhood. I just started looking up stuff in my neighborhood. And I hadn't noticed yet. This was already in here, but I'm kind of glad that I didn't. Because when I went to try to figure out, where does this investor live? Because I also was looking at the homestead exemption, like, okay, you get a homestead exemption, you're owner occupied, not looking any further. But often someone will have no homestead exemption, but their mailing address will be the subject parcel. Or they'll have no homestead exemption and they'll have an address listed in Clarke County. But then you can't, their name isn't highlighted blue. That would set off a ding in my head, like, okay, so this name does not show up again in property tax records, but it says that they live at an address in Athens-Clarke County. I'm going to look up who lives at this address. Okay. It's not this person, or, it is, and it's a trust, or it's them and their wife or whatever. When that doesn't happen, I look a little further. I go into the Georgia State Clerk's website, to see where else in the state does this person own property? And then often that will lead me to where that person currently has a homestead exemption in Fulton County, Gwinnett County, et cetera. Or sometimes it won't, which all I mean to say is that the mailing addresses on the tax assessor's website can be, but are not always misleading as to whether or not that investor lives in Athens-Clarke County or not.
Corroborating with the Secretary of State information on LLCs and other
Yes.
ownership groups is essential to get that data as close to correct as possible.
Oh, yes. I was just talking about natural person owners in that. But yes, so like Secretary of State for LLCs. Georgia State Clerk's website. And I mean, I have found it to be a kind of time-intensive process to actually get the information. So I'm not saying that I think that we should do that to get everything, but that it might be worth examining a selection of tax assessor records so that we can have a margin of error understanding of how many of these people who are listed as living in Clarke County are actually local residents still.
If it's helpful, our process leans on primary data sources for questions like that, rather than relying on aggregated data like census data or third-party woods and pool private company stuff for telling us local owner versus regional owner versus out-of-state owner. Because you need to use the primary source.
And the primary source that you're using is the tax assessor's website.
Correct.
Yes, I understand that.
Right, so even in the tax assessor's data, all the proofing that you're talking about, I totally agree with.
Yeah.
You have to go a little deeper than just what's at the surface.
And so I think that if this data is important to know, it is important to know it correctly. I'm not 100% sure how important it is to know, but I think that it would be worth getting a sense of how outdated tax assessor records are and how often they're wrong. And then communicating that to the people that you're communicating this data to.
Sarah, are you suspecting that the outside investor percentage is higher?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely higher. How much higher? Not sure. I don't have it right in front of me, but I've gotten like through 100 parcels in my neighborhood so far. And of the local investors, I've like definitely found at least 5% were not actually local investors. And I have 5% that I just could never. So maybe they're renting somewhere or maybe they died. There's definitely a few places where I'm like, oh, this person isn't alive anymore. So it's like 5% question mark, 5%, this is definitely wrong, ish. But again, that's only 100 parcels that I've looked at so far.
Kristen?
I was curious, so in the tables in the back, what is the difference between the summary of completed projects and the report of accomplishment?
The report of accomplishments has everything. So the stuff that was halfway completed, the things that are in process, the items that maybe aren't funded yet, it's a total accounting at the back.
So the first couple pages are things that were done.
Things that were done. And that was one of the comments we got at the public info meetings was, could you not just summarize the stuff that you did? Like show us what you got finished in the last 5 years, and then we'll look at the rest.
Okay.
And so that was an addition that we made since the committee was meeting.
Okay.
Didn't change the data, it just organized it.
I
So you
see.
can see what was.
Yeah, because I was looking through, I was like, wait, I saw this elsewhere, and then I realized that the header was different.
Yeah.
So, gotcha. All right. A couple little formatting things, I could just email them to you, but there's like
Sure.
a section that's centered instead of like aligned left. And there was this one on page 50, the very last bullet is red. I'm not really sure why.
Okay.
but-
Fair enough. Yes.
It was just for clarification on the report of accomplishments and that column, when you see agency by government, is that put in there because that's multiple departmental?
One clarifying question about that same chart on page 48, sorry. When you say residential parcels, is that parcels in mixed density residential and single family residential zoning categories? And does it therefore not count like apartment buildings in commercial downtown districts?
The residential parcel count is using our existing land use classification for a residential parcel. So it does not pick up a commercial downtown property that is mixed use.
Mhm.
No. So that's another data crunching issue.
Oh, yeah, and I mean,
Yeah,
that would
kind of.
really, that would really tilt that would make it look a lot different than for the census data, for instance, as to percentage of owner occupants versus renters.
Correct.
Okay, understandable.
Any other comments, questions? On page 1, I see a quote that's in double quotes.
So we really meant it. Somebody else said, somebody said.
But would anyone like to make a,
Do we have public input on this?
oh, yes, right? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this agenda item? Okay. I don't think so. So, yes.
I would like a motion, I'd like to make a motion to accept, recommend that the mayor and commission accept this and send it to the state.
I'll second.
And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. And is that the wording you all need? That's good, okay. Great,
Question
thank you. The next item is 199 Stone Mill Run and 450 Baldwin Street. From the staff first.
All right. Hello there. We're going to talk today about 199 Stone Mill Run and 450 Baldwin Street, otherwise known as River Mill. So the request is to rezone the parcel from RM2 to commercial downtown, specifically with the river designation, from that mixed density. With a 7-story and an 8-story residential mixed use, there's going to be commercial, around 15,000 square feet of that. Baldwin frontage, which is mezzanine above that. It's going to have around 401 apartments. Oh no. 966 bedrooms. This is targeted for students specifically. And there'll be 672 parking spaces broken between an 87 surface lot and a parking deck. The two waivers that they're looking for is one is for essentially first floor commercial to allow first floor residential throughout the development, and to shrink the 50% mark on that commercial that is required by code. And their second waiver is for the landscape buffer to be at least 10 feet wide. So this is the current location. As you can see, we have Sanford Stadium on the left here. We have the cemetery to the south, which was pointed out last time is zoned residential. A lot of people there. To the north, we have some of our other planned developments along Baldwin and Mitchell. And then we have the river, the North Oconee on the east side. So this is what the current use is. It's commercial general up front where the old gas station used to be. And Stone Mill Run currently is zone mixed density residential. And they are requesting to change that to commercial downtown. Same thing again. So this is the site plan of the updated one from what was here last time. The main changes are essentially the shrinkage of the parking deck. You can see in between essentially that A-frame on the left side is now much more distinguished in terms of what that space is going to be used for. And we have an overlook looking over the river with a mulch trail going down to the riverfront. Last time it was proposed to be a kayak launch that's now moved into this. These are the updated architectural elevations. This is specifically the Baldwin Street frontage that you're looking at right now. So we have much more windows in this time. And you can see that mezzanine on the second level there. And then we have on the bottom left proposal for public art. And this is the updated rendering of what it will look like in the area. In the foreground is the Mitchell Street, which we were talking about a little bit earlier. And then Sanford in the background with the parking lot where the railroad is over on the right side of this. And then on the left side is the School of Social Work and then the river. So for staff recommendation, we're splitting this into 2 points. For the future land use, we are recommending approval. It's consistent with our 2018 comp plan. Student housing is appropriate for this location. It's been student housing since the 70s. It touches the university property line. It's something that we believe is suitable. It's that natural endpoint for downtown future land use with the river buffer right there. This is where we as staff believe that downtown should have its conclusion. And then the downtown designation encourages this high-density multifamily housing, parking structures, walkability, and architectural styles that are with our downtown character. For the zoning, for the planned development, we're recommending denial for various reasons. We do support both waiver requests though, but however, we do have safety concerns with fire with the building exceeding 100 feet in height. This exceeding spot is specifically along the Baldwin frontage and the east side of that frontage where the public access road will be. Those two locations extend over 100 feet, and the fire marshal, as you can read in the report, has for various reasons recommended against that height. There's also some technical concerns that you can see in your staff report as well. That lack of a riverfront engagement, and then that CD density without some of the CD zone, which we spoke about last time. Mainly being for student housing, and it's almost all student housing. That being said, because staff believes that this is a use that is appropriate, if you as the planning commission decide to move forward, we did set up some conditions that we feel are appropriate in order to make this project compliant or within use. The two major ones, you can see all 8 in the end of the staff report if you'd like to refresh your memory on those. But the two major ones, we're specifically requesting a step back on the Baldwin Street frontage, capping it to 5 feet or 5 feet, 5 stories. 5 feet would be really bad. And that's two-part. One is to break up it so the fire department has no worries about the height there. But also it makes sure that the frontage along Baldwin, when students or residents are driving or walking along it, are able to have a match across the street with the other PD projects. And then the other big one that we wanted to bring to your attention is the left turn lane to be installed along Baldwin Street at each entrance at the developer's expense. That was a request specifically from Public Works Transit. And then in terms of, because I know where this height is questionable, this is just really quick. This is the only section that we're talking about changing any of the height elevations for. And even then, that's still not it. It's really only the top part and the right part. Those are the only two because of topography that exceed 100 feet. And so the step back essentially allows for that to be brought down a little bit more. And then so that way, even though after that box is still going to be at 9 and 7 stories, because of the topography, it's still within the fire department's life safety standards. I think that's about it. So that ends staff reports.
Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening, I'm Ed Lane with Smith Planning Group. I live at 1171 Keeneland Drive and glad to be back here before you with the River Mill project. I think last time we were here, I feel like we had a pretty strong project, but we got some good feedback from you all. And so kind of glad to share now some of the changes that were made in direct response to that. And I think I know at least we believe that feedback has made this a better project. So I will get into these. Max, if you could go to the next slide. So first, we added about 6,000 square feet of additional commercial space. And we tried to maximize the viable space on Baldwin, so added that mezzanine level. So there's a total of almost 16,000 square feet of commercial space now. In the spirit of earning that CD designation, the main interior drive there was just totally redesigned. The architecture was redesigned to engage that street so that it felt more public, more street-like pedestrian scale. And most significantly on that part was the addition of the 8 walk-up townhomes that are really nice facing the river and walk out onto the sidewalk. And the roof of those also serve as a patio deck, a nice sized patio deck for the units above that to face out on the river. We also added direct public access all the way down to the water level of the river. There was a significant reduction in parking from 745 spaces to 672. So we're now about 61%, bed to park ratio. And of course, those spaces are additionally leased. They don't come with any of the beds. It's an additional thing the student would have to lease. And there are now 85 public parking spaces, 75 in the deck, and then 10 on street at grade, and 245 bike spaces. Also, I believe it was Commissioner Rowland that brought up some of the infrastructure in this area is kind of old, and can it sustain all this development going on? And so the project includes the replacement of 500 linear feet of public water main that is in Baldwin Street and goes beyond the project frontage, significantly beyond it. And it would not only help serve this project, but even some of the other projects in this area. And also to address the scale of the building, one entire story was removed from that large portion of the building along the railroad tracks. Next slide, please. So you can see here where those townhome units face on that street out towards the overlook area and the river. And next slide, please. And on your right with the light blue there, that shows what will be designated as a public access easement. It will be recorded as such on the plat. And so that is permanently kind of public space, of course, maintained by the developer, but a public amenity for all of Athens. And, all of these kind of improvements were kind of made to try to earn that CD designation, provide kind of real tangible public benefits, and really make it so that, especially over time, as this area gets known, that people would feel comfortable coming into this site and hanging out, even if you don't have anything to do with living here. I think remarkable that it's doing this on a landlocked student housing redevelopment project, but some of these benefits are still able to be achieved here. Next slide, please. Beyond that, we've been working with the city departments to try to resolve many of the technical issues that we had before. And so that's why we had to table it, to have a little more time there. However, there are some new items that have been brought up, and so I want to spend the remainder of the time speaking to these. And just in the interest of time, you can see here essentially conditions number 2 through 8. The ones that are checked are essentially easy to do. We have no problem with them, and in fact, we've already made those changes on the plan. They were pretty easy to do, no problem there. The ADA spaces and the buffer. Agree with the intent of it and believe we can meet the intent of that pretty easily as well, but have a little bit of concern with the exact wording of the condition since that would become legal. And so just want to change those, but by and large, those conditions not a problem either. So really the issue is the height to talk about. This one is a lot more difficult. So do want to talk about that. So next slide, please. And there's really, I think, two issues with the height. From a planning perspective, perhaps the scale is not appropriate for this area. It's too large and looming over the adjacent properties. And then we have a fire issue. So just to speak to planning perspective first. And understand, it's not intuitive when you hear of a 100-foot tall building, that sounds large, and it is large. But just want to show a few diagrams here to show it in context of what that means, because it's really about 285 feet away from the cemetery property line, not to mention, the cemetery, proper. And just with how the terrain is there, it's not exactly looming. Next slide. And next slide, please. That shows the existing site. So you can see here where some buildings that were really close to the cemetery are actually being demolished, and we're moving much further away from it. And you can see the section lines there. Next slide, please. And you can see there on the bottom is where that existing building is and how visible it is to the cemetery versus how far we are away now and how the topography is and how it's really less visible than that existing structure now. Next slide, please. That is kind of a photo taken from the cemetery. There's very mature tree canopy in the cemetery, as we would expect, and it does a great job of kind of naturally buffering that view shed. Next slide, please. These two quick slides, this is kind of like a heat map of that. Those are areas where you would be able to see the building Not that it would be looming over it, but you can see it peeking over the trees. And next slide, and that is where you can see the stadium clearly. So, this cemetery, historic cemetery, but located very close to an urban environment, and sure, there are some large structures that you can see from it. Next slide, please. So next, really want to focus on the I think, more significant concern with the fire department. And, I just want to say, I feel like I want to frame the context of, I believe fire department's comment is made in good faith in the interest of the public safety. So you just keep that in mind with all the kind of points that I'm trying to make here. But I will just say that, in the first go around, the comments we received from the fire department was they recommended approval with no conditions. And since that time, of course, we removed one entire story from the building. And we worked closely with staff, because it is a large, complicated building, to make sure that we met code for maximum building height allowed, and that the way that was calculated correctly. And in fact, we do meet code. So we've reduced a story and we ensured we met code. And so then a little bit caught off guard that the fire department now is recommending denial on that. And I would just add other data points that there is, there's plenty of precedent in town about buildings being over 100 feet high. In fact, just to be sure, and so that we weren't relying on old plans, we had our survey crews go and shoot at street level, at sidewalk, and at the top at street of the Bank of America building, for example, and it's 117 feet tall. Now I know that's an older building, so maybe it was grandfathered in. Well, we did it at the Hyatt, which is a very new building, and it is 109, not counting the rooftop bar. If you count that structure, which is a habitable structure, it's really 120. And just to be clear, I'm not saying those buildings were built in excess of the allowable code. I am sure that they meet the code that we have. Now, the code, by its definition, assumes that buildings will be over 100 because it uses the average grade plane method. And so I don't understand the comment here, because we're using the same method, and sure, we are over 100 feet as code anticipates it will be. And this is in all, I know in RM zone, when there's a 35 foot max height, routinely the ridge of that structure is over 35. It's often 38 or 40 or 42, depending on the roof pitch. And that's just how, when you have to determine the height in language in the code, you have to come up with a method of calculating that. So, and the last thing I'll mention on this is that just because it was a big deal when it happened and it was pretty cool, but that Athens-Clarke County in 2019 had purchased the E1CR 137 fire truck that is known as the tallest ladder truck in North America. And it is billed as reaching 13 stories or 137 feet high, or that 137 is the length of the ladder. I know this is a simplistic diagram. They would not necessarily park the fire truck that close to the building, but this also kind of, I'm not quite understanding it, because it seems like in terms of equipment, this truck cost $1 million. We do have that equipment, which is kind of cool that we have that. And I just assume that our personnel is trained to use this very expensive piece of equipment. So I'm just giving you all that data that I'm just trusting the code is right. We have precedent all over the place for this. And if you could go just to the site plan, it shows the general site plan. So where there's the turnaround, right when you come in off of Baldwin, and there's the turnaround, is there, right there. So as soon as you get here on the left, where you can see kind of the little bulb there, the turnaround, at that level already, once you come off of Baldwin, that's already, it's just over 100 feet there. So that just shows, again, it's this topography that's dropping off, where at the street frontage, we peak over that 100-foot limit, but per how code has defined it, that should not, I don't believe, pose a public safety issue. So, with all that in mind, this project is a significant investment. redeveloping this site, significant investment to Athens and a better use of this land. And, you know, in general, when we think 20 years ahead, I think going vertical is not a bad thing. And from the many, many benefits that, you know, I've spoken about so far, and they're included in that report, you know, just ask for y'all's consideration and approval on the merits of this project. Team is available for questions as always, and thank y'all for your time.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in favor of this application? And is anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, we'll start with our discussion. Sarah, do you want to start?
I would love to. Something that I heard the applicant say, which I appreciate but disagree with, is that the fire marshal made these comments in good faith, which I do agree with, and in the interest of public safety, which I don't think is supported by everything I've heard from their comment. It seems that the fire marshal's comment is not out of concern for public safety, that there's not a public safety component mentioned, but out of concern for the fire department's budget, which is a valid concern from the fire department, to be sure. But in addition to also being confused as to why this 100-foot building is a problem, but the other 100-foot buildings are not, I would seriously urge the commission, when they are going to make a vote on this, to consider the cost of training the fire department compared to the potential revenue of 500 more students in this area. I think that the math would turn out in favor of the city, and that therefore maybe the fire marshal does not have the entire city's financial well-being in mind. They're kind of looking at their own thing. Going vertical in the future is a thing that will probably happen more if our city continues to do well, if it continues to be a place people want to live. Even if we get the university to build the student housing on campus that we keep asking them to build. And so an investment in training our fire department doesn't seem like a bad thing to me. I've understood that there's been some pushback from the fire department as well in being in the requirement that they be trained to be EMPs. It sounds to me like the fire department doesn't want to deal with the extra work. I don't think that that's necessarily a valid reason to deny this application. As far as the scope on the height goes, just looking at where this parcel is, I don't really get the concern too much. I really appreciate the concern about the Oconee Cemetery, and I appreciate what the applicant has put up here, illustrating that a little bit better. But the frontage here between Williams and Baldwin Street, it is not, it is a student housing that's facing more student housing that has the university over to the left of it. And train tracks and river on either side. If there's a place where just a big old chunk of student housing belongs, that seems like a pretty good place for it. And so I'm happy to see it. I wanted to respond to staff's comment about the townhouses, only being a benefit to the students who live in the townhouses and not to everyone else. That I don't really buy that. Like when you think about walking, now obviously this is not Central Park. When you think about walking along the perimeter of Central Park, you got all these houses along the perimeter of Central Park where very, very rich people live. We don't just say that, those houses are only a benefit from a design and planning standpoint to the people who live there. Having people entering and exiting and looking over that street is a benefit. And I think that was a smart change that was made to this plan. it's not a historical downtown looking thing, but also this doesn't really connect to anything that non-students would go to. I do have one question for the applicant, and then I will stop and let other people talk. Could you, how realistic would it be to build a pedestrian bridge from this to East Campus Road? A pedestrian or bike or something, second mode of egress?
So I think I know where you're talking, where it would almost hit the little island in the middle of the river and then go back to the overlook on the other side.
I'm looking the other way, not over the river, but over the railroad,
Oh,
towards campus.
gotcha. Sorry. So from our perspective, not difficult at all. And we made significant attempts to coordinate with the university to try to secure that in some way. It would obviously be a huge benefit for our project, for the students that live there. And we, unfortunately at this time, the timing is especially bad because the university is considering their options on redeveloping that parking lot that's on the other side of the railroad. So from their perspective, from a real estate management perspective at the university, they're trying to figure out what to do there. They obviously don't want to encumber their options there by, say, a big investment is made on a pedestrian connection there, and then they want to change it up. So the timing was very bad, and they made it clear to us in no uncertain terms, like, not going to work out. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
So frustrating, but I understand. Okay, that's all for now.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I had some comments and a question or two for the applicant. I appreciate the changes in the project since the last time we saw it. I agree with you that it's better, and I liked it before. I think it's a great location for student housing. I think putting student housing as close as you can really get to the UGA bus station on Jackson Street means that the students are much less likely to drive, and UGA's enrollment's growing, and traffic's a lot better when the students aren't in town, and anything that keeps students on foot and in buses, I think, is commendable. So I appreciate all that, and I appreciate the significantly reduced parking. In particular, because as long as UGA is not going to build enough dorms to house the students, and as long as they're going to keep growing their enrollment year after year, projects like this will help reduce pressure that UGA would otherwise put on our housing market. And so they will help with our housing cost crisis that we're having right now. I wondered if you could talk about the step back idea that staff described, like just from a practicability standpoint. I appreciate how you laid it out for us about most of these conditions are not a big deal. They're readily doable for y'all, but I would assume, you talk in your report about the desire to provide more open space on the parcel. And so would that density disappear and we'd lose bedrooms, or would it go elsewhere on the parcel and we'd lose green space? Or if there were any kind of condition, how much of a density reduction would that be, and what would be y'all's approach? Or would it make the project not feasible at all? You tell us.
So, and I may get you guys to help a little on the unit count, but what I do want to say, so I think our big concern with that condition, accepting that condition, is that, as staff has said before, when it's small things, we can definitely make those changes and already have, and it'll be ready for them when they send it on Monday, to mayor and commission. And I think staff would feel comfortable that, yep, they did it, we're good and go. With something like this, it's just a bigger change. And so there's a domino and cascading effect of, one, can we make that change in time? And two, are they going to feel comfortable that they have seen that cascading domino and we haven't created other problems we're not aware of? So it's just a substantial change, and it does to the density, if one of y'all could speak to it. But I think that's our biggest concern, is that it's a pretty significant change with very little time to vet that. And on the step back, I'm not sure if we were talking about removing one floor there, that's what I understand. They said 5 stories, which is really significant. It would actually put it below Baldwin Village across the street, which is at 1.75 feet high. So I don't, that would be a dramatic reduction that I know would be not feasible. So can y'all speak to the density?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Sam Newman, American Campus, Austin, Texas. If we're stepping the project back to the 5-story height, you're going to lose somewhere between 60 and 70 beds that you can't replace. It just doesn't make sense with how we're trying to achieve the project by going vertical and maximizing open space to go put another building somewhere else to replace that. We do have things we could look at to maybe move units around, but not at a story, maybe reducing a story, but not necessarily at, 5 stories, stepping back and then going on.
Okay, thank you. So with all respect to staff's concerns about massing and scale, I wasn't, it strikes me that just because somebody across the street is building 5 stories, requiring y'all to do that would be totally arbitrary. I don't think the buildings across the street from each other need to be the same height. So I don't think I shared staff's concern on that. And I guess a couple other things I was going to say is the height meets code, and I think be uncomfortable rejecting the applicant's proposal on the height when they can do it. It meets our code, and we've allowed other buildings that are taller. I was actually going to ask you, Brad, if or anyone on staff, if y'all know how tall that Mitchell Street building that we've seen a bunch of times recently and just got approved.
Mitchell Street on the low end is about 80 feet tall.
At the lowest.
Towards William Street, on the low end of it it's right at about 80 feet.
Okay, so that's the highest.
That's the highest end.
Okay. So we've allowed other buildings that are taller. It sounds like we maybe have the firefighting capacity, although I suppose that 137-foot ladder might not be located in the firehouse. It's near to this, but ultimately, I think denying it on that basis troubles me, given that our code definition in commercial downtown would allow this, and we have other buildings that have been built that exceed it. The mayor and commission certainly are free to disagree, but I think my own inclination would be to recommend that they approve it without that condition. I think all the other conditions seem reasonable. The other thing I was going to say, just following up on something Sarah said, is that about, maybe we just need some money to train the firefighters so they can use their 137-foot ladder and so on. The applicant had numbers in here suggesting that the assessed value of the existing property is 33 million, and as built, it would be 130 million. And so a quick back of the envelope on how much revenue Clarke County gets out of that increased assessed value is about $1.5 million to $2 million a year in additional property taxes. So not to mention the sales taxes from the commercial stuff and the student activity and so, their sales taxes that they bring in. So sounds like plenty to provide training. So it seems like a win for Clarke County from a housing quantity standpoint and a fiscal standpoint. So I think I'm for it.
Kristen.
I was wondering, could we go back to a slide that had kind of like a bird's eye view of the development that showed it was kind of like looking up a Coney Street, I guess.
On our presentation.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I thought that this was pretty helpful. So wait, the proposed building is the one that's colored in, correct?
Yes.
And then, so we're looking, I see, so that's the Coney Street snaking up through, and that's the mark on the right. Is that how that is?
No, that's
Baldwin. Baldwin.
Well, that's the proposed
Project
that's
with
the
construction
parking
now.
lot behind it. Okay. Yeah, so I thought this was really interesting because this was the view as I was going through the packet that I wanted to kind of get my head around. I feel like we're a planning commission, so we're planning what our city looks like. And, I don't have a problem with student housing here. I don't have a problem with a lot of student housing here. The height of the building was what really kind of gave me pause. is it enough for me to vote against it? I don't know, but, I'm not happy with it. But that's fine. It's just being arbitrary and whatever. A question for the applicant. Could you describe a little bit how the space along the river works for the general public? Like, how might I interact with that space?
Yes, sure. So, and I don't know if just the site plan would be easiest here, but so on Baldwin Street, we do have a very narrow frontage, but there are two entrances. One, and there would be signage, goes to essentially the public parking in the deck and if you're going to use some of that commercial space. But for the river access, you are really coming in on the one to the east there. And that's where I had mentioned we had kind of redesigned that as a streetscape. So looking down that street there, it looks like a street sidewalk, street trees, street lamps. And it goes down that building and the townhomes kind of face out on that. So little stairs and stoops up to the townhomes. And of course, so there are on-street parking spaces there. So you might come there and if there's available space right there, you just park on the side of the street and get out. You see there's a turnaround. So if all the spaces are taken, you would turn around and perhaps go into the deck and then come out that way. Or you could drop somebody off or whatever. And then there's a wide sidewalks, 10 feet wide that kind of go down. I know it's hard to see here, but to this kind of overlook, that semicircle.
Hey, Ed,
Yes.
there's a laser pointer on them.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. There you go. Thank you, Bruce. Okay. All right. So this little semicircle,
Right.
that's the overlook. So you're getting closer to the river and it's kind of cantilevered over. And I mean, that's just kind of a public space, got some benches, trees, and then some other just space, passive recreational space. Now, in the mulch trail going down. So keep in mind, I mean, in order to stick with the spirit of we were reclaiming this buffer, where we peeled all this asphalt out and all this parking and got structures out of the floodplain. We did want to, put some improvements there so people would go there and it's not just totally wild and grown up. But at the same time, we didn't want to go overboard and now go and add all of that impervious and rebuild all over that buffer. And so the overlook and the more passive amenities, you could definitely, walk your dog, throw a frisbee, hang out, have a picnic. And if you want to go down to the river for, various reasons, that would all be from there. So that's kind of how that public space is engaged there.
Okay. I was curious too, especially, you go down there now and it's like all river right now.
Yeah, and it's extremely steep. Like you can't get down there.
Right. So I was curious. So is all that going to be kind of graded up? So
Yes.
that
So,
down the road?
any kind of work like that requires a buffer. And because this is because removing all of the structures and asphalt is viewed very favorably by the state, getting that buffer is not going to be a problem because we're reclaiming it. But then that kind of by default allows us to regrade and shape and replant and get that access in. So yes, it would have to be. Now, it's not like the entire river frontage we're laying it back because that is a floodplain, but the grades would be kind of sculpted. And then, of course, the actual access would be a switchback all the way down to the river.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That helps.
I have a question for staff. From y'all's conversations, just back to the fire department, I thought of it after Matt's comment. Did the fire department give y'all any sense or understanding of why they flip-flopped on this? Was it a significant design change that made it go from a good to a bad for them? Or was it that they just didn't really notice it the first time they looked at it, or what was it?
No, they didn't give me a sense on that. I mean, I know they did a thorough review of this plan as part of their recommendation, and that's what the basis of their current recommendation to you is based on.
They just might not have done a thorough review the first time.
I don't.
I'm not asking you to, would never ask you to draw that conclusion.
Katie and then Lucy.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about fire and height too. Just to point out that I think the staff concern about height was at Baldwin Street, not the view from the cemetery. And I do see the point, and Kristen alluded to this, that it is a lot of height looming above someone who's walking down Baldwin Street, and there's not a visualization of that. It's a very, very distant aerial view, showing that facade on Baldwin Street. So I'm guessing that's because it would look very overwhelming. I'm not saying that's a reason I would vote against it, because again, this isn't, I agree that this is a good place for dense student housing. But I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page about the request to reduce the height just on, as far as I understand, staff requested a reduction just on that facade. And I assume that's what the applicants were responding to.
Yes, our understanding of what they're asking is the slide they had that showed it in yellow. Right, that's our understanding,
Okay.
but to reduce that to 5 stories.
And what would that reduction in height be? Do you know? No.
It's about
It reduced 52 feet. Oh, no, from 5 stories, it reduced 4 stories, so that'd be, maybe 42 feet.
Okay,
42 feet.
okay, thanks. So yeah, haven't made a decision on that, but the fire, that sounds really beyond the scope of this. I think seems like a matter for outside expertise, or Matt, I really liked your calculation. In that case, it's a matter of, I guess, either the mayor and commission or the manager deciding to allocate that money for training and equipment so that we could cover buildings like this. I don't see that as in our purview, just not understanding how one would approach firefighting in a building like this. It sounds like someone like an insurance company would have a much better sense of fire safety and an outside opinion. Brad, you had mentioned there was something about the angle of the trucks in addition to the height that made it difficult for could you summarize that again?
Well, and again, the technical aspects of firefighting, I'm not prepared to discuss, but, I do know that, and Mr. Lane alluded to the same thing, the ladder that goes 137 feet in the air straight up, there are certain angles of approach that you take to a ladder to get it onto a building that are not straight up, and they're not anywhere near. They're about 70 to 72%, 75. So you're tipping at an angle, and just by geometry, you are reducing the reach that it goes vertical on the wall of a building. Now, what that means with this ladder on that type of a building, all I can go by is what my fire department has told me, and I don't question what they told me.
Let me catch Lucy and then Sarah.
Yeah, my biggest concern about this is the fire marshal, because having served on subdivision review committee for several years with fire marshal, I trust what they have to say because that's their level of expertise. They know all about that. I can address the Bank of America building. It was built sometime probably in the early 60s before there was ever zoning. The first zoning ordinance was in 1964. And I got here in 73, and it was the CNS building at that time, and it was the tallest building downtown. And I don't think anybody ever thought about firefighting, to be perfectly honest. I think it was they just built buildings. I don't quite understand what how the situation occurred at the Hyatt, because I don't remember that coming into play, the Hyatt. Do you remember anything about that?
I mean, this is just based on information that I heard for the first time tonight. It recently went through a review process, so I'm
Obviously went
I'm
through
not
the process because
question the 109 feet, but I do know that was an averaging issue as well. But if it is at a singular point on the elevation of a building at the low end, on the north end of that building, as it fronts Thomas Street, hits 109, but it's below on the front. I mean, that's, again, it's the fire department's.
I think that's probably what the situation was.
And I do know there are parapets on that facade at the roof level too, that go above the decking of, I'm not prepared to tell you how that one was evaluated.
But I hesitate to say that this is a fiscal issue from the fire department standpoint. I think that is not where they come from. That's just been my experience dealing with them. And I have a lot of worries about it. I was asking Matt if he was here when they had the fire at Terry College of Business. And he was not, right? Yeah. And that was a much lower building. I think it's 5 stories, maybe 6, because I think the top story may have been sort of a attic. And you were here. Okay. And that thing burned like, a bonfire, because they were unable to get in there at a proper angle in order to do what fire departments do. They don't shoot water from below. They shoot from above. And so they have to be able to get well above in order to get the water on the fire. Everybody familiar with that? Okay. So I'm a little hesitant to say, okay, this is just a tough thing. The fire department just doesn't want to deal with it. They went out and bought a new truck. This doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I think that they're being honest with us. I'm sorry that we don't have a better report from the fire department, but I agree with Brad that he gets the information from the fire chief or the fire department, and that's their expertise, and I think we have to go with that. I really do. This is one truck. That's another thing. I'd love to know where that thing is housed. Because that's another thing. In the case of a fire, and you've got a lot of people involved in this, I mean, this is a residential building. In the case of a fire, you've got to get that truck there as fast as possible with the proper personnel who can actually operate the truck and fight the fire. And I'm just a little nervous about this. I understand what Matt's saying, that, this is code and all that, but there's something we're not getting a full picture here. I don't see. So I'm not going to support the rezoning. I will support the land use change.
In response to Katie and in response to Lucy, specific to this and more general concern, the idea, we do not have the expertise in this room to know about fire protection. Absolutely correct. We're not engineers, but Katie, I would love to borrow your copy of Confessions of a Recovering Engineer. We love that book here. The general notion, the higher notion of which I believe is that engineers are looking at their own problems, and they are telling us when something makes them nervous in response to their own problems. And I don't think that any one engineer should have veto power or total control over whether or not something gets built. As to Katie's comment about, we don't have the expertise, I mean, absolutely. My first comment was that I seriously can hope that the Merit Commission will look further into this. But I think that there is more information available than this one sentence, fire cannot support because of equipment, manpower, and training, which I would like to come back to. Equipment, manpower, and training, no comment has been made at any point that this is unsafe. Not saying that the fire department, not saying that they have even implied that that's what it's about. I think we hear fire department and we think they are only thinking about public safety, but they are also, they're an employer, they're an organization, they have a lot of things to worry about. I think it's concerning that this got a thumbs up the first time and got a thumbs down the second time with no real explanation. I think if we're going to trust the fire marshal, which one of them are we going to trust were they looking closely then, or are they looking closely now? Because they can't both be true. So hopefully between now and the vote at the Merit Commission, this will be looked at closely. It seems to me that this is an economic problem. Hopefully between now and then, the manager's office, the mayor and commission will look at that economic problem from the point of the whole government. And if the fire marshal decides to say, no, really, actually, it is a safety where, you know, for this, this, and this reason, then that information can be clarified. I strongly support approval based on what we have in front of us right now, but of course, further information comes to light. I hope that the decision-making body will take it into account. And I hope that we can think critically about what it means to get a report from a specialist.
You,
Go ahead.
I think we're all good at critical thinking here. Thank goodness. Can I ask a quick question, the applicant, seriously quick? If we were to vote to table this for one cycle so that we could get this information about fire safety, how would that, I mean, obviously that's not optimal for you, but how would that affect you?
Yep. So, we've talked about this and we've tabled it once. And what, Sam and his team have told us is that if there's any hiccup in the schedule from this point, it just means the entire project shifts 12 months. So
You're looking at a year. A month table would put you a year out.
But a year.
That's all the answer I need. Thank you very much. I do share the concerns that I've heard in this group about why is this, why does it meet code and yet it somehow doesn't meet fire safety standards? I find that very, very confusing. I guess I hope that my colleague Sarah is right, that there's enough time between now and the mayor commission vote to get some of these questions answered. I just really hate the idea of people living, on that top floor at the front of the project. And, do you have to sign some sort of waiver that our 137-foot ladder may not reach you? I mean, it's very concerning for me. I like everything else about this project. But I do find that, just kind of hard to get my arms around. And I agree with Lucy. I know that the fire chief has, the one job. You've got one job, and that is to keep people safe and make sure that your equipment can save people if a catastrophe happens. If they're telling us we are not sure about this, we need to know more about that. So I'm trying to work this out. I think that's not enough for me to vote no on this because it does meet code. But I'm very concerned, and if everyone is correct, and I agree with this, if going vertical is the future, especially in these very dense areas, we've got to figure this out. I was on the commission for a number of years, and I remember spending money on, wow, we're going to get a ladder truck out at, Fire Hall 8, or these are big, expensive pieces of machinery that we buy with our taxpayer money. Why can't it serve a building that meets code? So that's probably what's tipping me on the side of approving this, because as I said, like everything else about it is just fine, but it is concerning.
So Monique and then Joey.
Yeah. I guess as an engineer, I'm often reviewing plans and designs all the time. But what never gets past my designs is safety and quality. And so with that being said, I'm aligned with you in just making sure we've exhausted all, potential solutions to align with what the fire code needs and what the requirements are, because we don't want to compromise people because we want to have a new building. I'm not comfortable with that. If there's any other type of design revisions that can be done, I would strongly recommend just kind of reviewing that and coming back with an updated solution. I know it's compromising for you all to push you out 12 months, but if that means saving someone's life, then what's 12 months? So it's just something to think about.
Joey and then Matt.
Safety is always of the utmost importance. But the fact for me that this meets code, I like the project. I like the way it looks. It fits within the community. It fits where it should be for Athens-Clarke County. There's several things that I really like. I've always thought a missing part of Athens-Clarke County is not utilizing the river and making spaces along our river more accessible to our community. And I hope this is the start of something where there's a big giant parking lot that we can fix through there and we can go all the way around and make our river part of our city and part of what we have and do it right. So I think I love that aspect of what it brings. A 137-foot fire truck, you know, building equipment and my parents own a lot of equipment. 137 feet is not what they really want somebody to climb up, but it is for somebody if they have to use it for 137 feet. So if they got to use it for a building that's 140 feet, that is why they have it 137 feet. They don't build it to say 137 feet, but you can only use it 75. We're going to throw that out there just for the public to see it, and we're going to let you spend $1 million on it. That's not why they build it. So the 137 foot properly trained can be utilized at 137 feet. So, and then it was brought up about the building on campus. Well, I mean, that was an old building before this truck was bought, and the landscaping to get to that building, I mean, that's just, let's think about buildings all across campus that were built 30 and 40 years ago that you can't really get to. And if they ever caught fire, they will never be saved. So this being a new building, I believe that it's, the engineers have looked at it with every, dotting every I, crossing every T. It meets code. We have the equipment. You talk about location. Well, my common sense would tell me it should be located downtown where the tall buildings are. And if there's a fire in this building, I can promise you they're going to code every fire department within every angle to get them there. Not one fire department will be the one servicing it. All of them, 5 points will be, downtown will be, any fire department near will be all hands on deck as any building in Athens. Safety is the utmost importance. So I hear the comments about fire and I hear the concern, but I really think this is something that we send to the mayor and commission and let them put their comments in which way they would like to go. But I do think this is a great addition to the area in which it is, and I'm in full support of it.
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion in a second, but I just want to preface it by saying that I completely agree with what multiple people have said about, you know, safety first. Like we can't build something that where people's lives are going to be at risk. And what we have from the fire marshal is not, this is not a safe building. It says fire cannot support because of equipment, manpower, and training limitations. And so that does sound to me like it's a solvable problem that is not. It's not that the building is too high. It's that, you know, the city would need to make policy choices about like, here's some more money for training or what have you. And so that's a mayor and commission decision to make. I agree with what Katie said a while back about that fire safety is for code compliant buildings is not really in our purview. And so, you know, I'm going to encourage the applicant to, between now and, you know, if this doesn't get tabled and goes up to the mayor and commission with a recommendation one way or the other, you're obviously going to want to sit down with the fire marshal and see what y'all can work out. And maybe you know, you guys can solve the problem and make it real easy for the mayor and commission. I don't think that this, as a member of this body, I don't want to stand in the way of allowing that process to unfold. If the mayor and commission end up hearing from the fire marshal who works for them and who can give them a lot more than these 12 words that are on our report, they just say manpower and training. You know, then the mayor and commission may decide, oh, it really does feel like a safety concern, and they may vote you down or condition it on removing a story or something like that. But I just haven't heard enough to say like, oh, well, you know, the engineer said they don't support it, and so we have to kill it. That's, you know, that feels like overreaching. So the motion I want to make is, and Brad, maybe I'll ask your opinion on this, but just to approve with the conditions numbered 2 through 8 as recommended by staff. But with a tweak to the ADA one based on what the applicant said. maybe just adding the following language to the end of condition 6, the ADA handicap parking spot one. To the extent legally permissible in consultation with the applicant's ADA consultant or something like that. Because I heard them saying that maybe the consultant would say like, oh, you're breaking the law if you do what it says here.
I would feel better about that than the recommendation to simply eliminate the condition, because then it eliminates our ability to not have them halfway across the parking lot if.
Yeah.
So to do that, but certainly, if we receive a report from an ADA consultant and they properly place them in accordance with that, we're going to accept that placement.
Okay, so that's my motion to,
Do we need to do?
I'm sorry,
future
yes.
Land use first.
We need a land use plan first and then a motion with conditions on the zoning second.
thank you.
So go on future.
Let me back up. So I will make a motion to approve the future land use amendments.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Julie? Okay, any discussion on that particular motion? Okay, so all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great.
And my motion on the zoning is to approve with staff conditions numbers 2 through 8, with a modification to condition 6 by adding these words at the end, to the extent legally permissible in consultation with the applicant's ADA consultant. Second.
Okay, second by Joy. And further discussion on that? Sarah?
Sorry, one more thing. I have to say, for the benefit of anyone watching this, people are saying, people have said that if something is not up to the fire code, that is a concern, which I absolutely agree. But we have fire codes and this meets or must meet all of them. They are not asking for any waiver from any, like the International Fire Code, which has been adopted by the state of Georgia, by Athens-Clarke County. In addition to the International Building Code, Appendix D about fire districts, also part of the law here, which, relates to densely populated areas, downtowns, and their design for fire safety. There are fire codes. There is no violation of the fire code here. The fire marshal has not indicated that there is any violation of any fire code here. Like in this staff, to staff to anyone yet, it seems. So just in considering what has the fire marshal said, they have not said that there is anything not up to code for fire safety here. And as we have heard, buildings that are entirely up to code can catch fire. Fires happen. This is not a code issue.
Sorry, just a few little things. Do we need to be any more specific about the extent of the main water loop? Or is that, I think they had said a certain distance of water main?
That's the water loop that Mr. Lane was talking about. That was actually a public line extension coming down Baldwin to increase the diameter of the water in the street. And then in addition to that, the looping of an 8-inch system throughout the project. I think that's all doable from their standpoint under the current wording of the condition.
Increased main water loop to 8-inch diameter.
The only one, and it has not been amended by Matt's motion, that I would, from a staff standpoint, and I don't think it was really even brought up, we received some information with regard to the left turn lanes that it'd be within the existing travel lane. I would not encourage you to include that. I think it's doable, and absolutely if it's doable to make that redesign within the current curb to curb width, that's what they're going to do and that's what we will approve. But I would not want to limit the ability by modifying the staff language if there is a need to get a little bit of additional width in the road to get the left turn lanes in properly. So I think our condition wording reflects that. And that's the way you left it too. So I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Is there something you want to add to that?
Yes, please. Just because we're talking on the conditions on the water main loop, if we could just add at least, because we're fine with 8-inch, but once it gets onto the site, it may even be bigger than 8-inch. We just haven't gotten to that part. If we just say at least, I think that satisfies public utilities.
Fine with that.
And then on the buffer, there was a reference on the code section. Are y'all okay with that? Because we would like it to say 915.3A is the buffer that we will meet with planning. I
That's
believe the,
listed in the waivers request, or where is that?
no, it's in the conditions.
Oh, number 3, got it.
Yeah, because it lists a different code section that is like an industrial. Anyway, it's one that allows 3 different buffer options. And I think if staff is okay with that, we know we can meet that very, very easily on the site. The other one,
Tell us that code number again.
yes, it's 9-15-3A.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
And I can explain that a little bit further, and I'm just getting my conditions here real quick. Yeah, the site in there under 915-12A11 is it should have been 915-3A. Our intention was for it to say 915-3A-2, which is a 20-foot landscape buffer. What Mr. Lane is asking for is if you just simply say 915-3A, that gives them the option of 3 choices of buffers, either a 10-foot with a fence in the middle of it, or 20-foot planted, or 50-foot undisturbed. And if you're comfortable with that, that certainly would be amenable to us. But our intent of it was a 20-foot landscape strip, but this would give them the added flexibility of doing the 10-foot with a fence if they wanted to.
Okay, can I amend my own motion?
I think so, right? He could just amend his own.
Yes.
motion? Okay.
Okay, so I'll amend condition 4 to insert the words at least for 8-inch diameter. And condition 3 to replace the code citation with 9-15-3A2.
It depends on what you want. If you want the 20-foot landscape only, it would be A2. If you're comfortable with them selecting of the 3 choices, just say 15-3A.
Oh, 3A then, yeah, I'm comfortable with staff and the applicant working that out.
And then did you also want to amend number 6, something about to the extent legally permissible, or?
That was already in the.
Oh, was it?
Already in
Sorry.
there.
Okay, okay, and then do have a second for that.
I second it. Now I cut that.
One thing I wanted to ask is, I don't know what to think about the fire discussion in that, I mean, everyone's made really good points. But I also, I do think that what staff was also really getting at was the scale of this thing. And I can only assume that the recommendation to reduce by 5 stories was more related to that than fire. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were asking to reduce down to 5. The first 2 floors on that
Right.
front are tall.
Yeah.
So it would have still put it up in the 60s to 70 feet on that.
So how many stories is that? If that whole, it's that section, right? How many stories is that?
9.
9, and you're asking to reduce it by 4.
I think that's right, Max. Is it 9?
So from Baldwin frontage and then going along the west side, that is all 9 foot. We're saying essentially just the Baldwin frontage or that whole section, the yellow part here to be reduced to up to 5 stories.
Yeah, if we were simply wanting to add a condition to address the fire department comments, it could have been by reducing
10 feet or whatever.
the overall height of the building to be no more than 100 feet, and you may have been able to do that by losing 1 floor off of the front of it and reducing some of the heights on the 2 commercial or something. I mean, the 5 stories was a big ask, but it was much more to try to keep it in line with what was going on across the street, because even that building, as I recall, it had a commercial kind of facade on it and then a small step back and it goes up further. But, we were trying, it was much more about massing and scale to get to 5 stories than it would have more than handled any concern of the fire department if you would have gone that
What I
far.
wanted to bring up is that there's 2 things going on here. The 5 stories is a big ask. I think if I were the applicant, I would be similarly concerned about how that sort of affects the bottom line and design timing. And I'm just wondering, if this were reduced by 1 story, the conversation about fire, I think probably gets, I don't know, I can't really guess what the fire marshal would say to that, but I'm going to assume that it would be less of a concern. But I guess I just want to bring up the option, or just see what folks think about you know, that's,
I think we need to, I think we've got a motion and a second.
Yeah, I
on the
think-
table that we need to vote on
Let's
first.
need to vote. Yeah.
Well, can I make a competing motion? I'm gonna test Robert's rules. I feel like, can I make a?
It would be a substitute motion.
Make a
Make a substitute motion.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make a substitute motion that takes everything that Matt said, but includes staff recommendation number 1, limiting it to 7 floors.
Do we have a second?
I would want to hear more from the applicant about
Motion.
if that.
So that motion fails for lack of a second.
Okay, good try. Sorry. Okay, is there any, so is the hearing is that you can't have any more discussion on the motion on the floor right now?
If I may, the kind of conversation that y'all are having right now feels a little bit more like something we'd have an agenda setting. Yeah, the sort of speculation about but maybe I'm not hearing it right. I mean, obviously Kristen heard it differently, that she's like ready to make a substitute motion, but it does seem like this motion's been sitting on the floor for a while, and there's been a lot of back and forth between the chair and staff and the applicant, but the rest of us, I think, are.
Okay, Joey?
And I feel like that is more, I mean, by right, code allows what they want to do. And now we're going to get into design and setback of only 5 stories. And I mean, it's private property rights. They have that right, by right, to put that building there the way they want it as it's here. Like, so we're asking for these conditions. So I think that, I mean, I have a problem with that.
Yeah, it's a PD, it's not in downtown zone.
I just want to point out, this is a PD and this is what PDs are for, is actually for these kind of discussions. But I think we're done discussing. So all in favor, please, or I do roll call vote.
Hearing. This is to vote in favor of the zoning motion that's on the floor
Yes.
with Matt's amendments. Gary,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Pass,
Yes.
Rowland,
No.
Sanders,
No.
Tucker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, next item, 505, Olympic Drive. We'll start with the staff report.
Ready? Okay. This project is back. We've seen it. This will be the 3rd time that we've seen it. We saw it once as a rezone, then we've seen it at a preliminary, and this is now at the master stage. Slide, please. Request is to rezone the property from EI and I, employment, industrial and industrial, to RM1, residential mixed density, and then it is planned development. This also requires a change to the future land use from employment center to mixed density residential. The proposal is for 271 attached townhomes, translates into 681 bedrooms. It would be gated access, front-loaded garages on all the units. There would be an amenity area close to Olympic Drive, and there are stormwater basins of fairly large scattered throughout the site. And I would like to point out that a virtually identical request was recommended for denial by this body in July of 2022. This is the site, the loop right here. Peter Street is right there, and then Olympic Drive here. As you can see, the site is outlined in red. It is wooded, it is wet. There's a lot of creek area and riparian stuff there. And it is currently undeveloped. Everything to the right, all this area is part of Athena Industrial Park. It's all zoned for industrial uses. It's the prime area that we have envisioned developing those industrial users for the past 20 years, if not longer. On the left, you can see, again, you can see the employment center, the future land use, all of that purple. is meant to designate this area as part of the Athena Industrial Park. And that would change to this 2 parcels to be mixed density residential on the right. There's the zoning. As you can see, it's EI right now. It would change to RM1 PD. As you can see, there's EI, I, and other similar zones right around there. Currently, there are no similar RM type zones adjacent to the area right now. So it would be an isolated district, both in the future land use and in the zoning, which is of concern to staff. This is an illustration that the applicant has submitted of the project. As you can see, the townhomes are grouped in several different configurations, 4, 6, and 8, as you'll see in your architecture. It's the same thing throughout. There are stormwater basins here and here. There's most of that wooded area is done to avoid creeks, as you can see on the next plan. All that gray area, all these lines coming through here represent creek areas and buffers that have to be respected. You can see there's the amenity area on your right. As Olympic Drive comes up, the amenity area is right here. And then you've got the railroad as the border on the left. Next slide. This is the 4 unit section of townhomes they've proposed. They've also proposed a 6, and on the next slide, here's what the 8 looks like. So it's identical throughout, which would is not compliant with code. As you can see, they are front loaded. They are dominated by their garages. And so staff has some concerns about what kind of public area we're creating with all of these front loaded garages there. Next slide, please. Our staff recommendation, as you can see in the report, we've noted that it's inconsistent with the future land use map. It's inconsistent with the zoning map, and it's inconsistent with our 2018 comprehensive plan. The plan does call for increasing the supply of housing at a variety of price points and types, but it also calls for job creation of good jobs, particularly available to perhaps more working class residents. And so that is an equally important goal within the comp plan, and this project potentially could threaten the creation of jobs in this area. We're also looking to do nodal infill in the comp plan and basically place residences close to neighborhood services. This is not close to really any kind of neighborhood service, commercial, schools, any kinds of daily or weekly destinations. It's not close to transit. So it's really isolated, both on our maps, on our future land use and zoning, and also very practically as to what stuff and development is around there or not around there. In this case, since there's a lot of undeveloped property there. Our main concern and the concern of our economic development department, as they specified in the staff report, is that introducing a residential use here in the industrial park creates significant barriers to industrial recruitment. A lot of industries these days don't want to be within a mile. They draw a mile radius around their site, and they don't want any residential within that mile radius because they don't want to create problems for neighbors or deal with neighbors complaining about the effects of their industry. And so they'd rather just be farther away. Which then impacts the ability to create quality jobs in Athens. The Economic Development Department, again, has specified that there's a lot of value in these industrial jobs. And so inhibiting that would be detrimental to Athens. And it also would use utility capacity in this area, particularly sewer, that is needed for future industrial users in this area. So with that, we are recommending both denial on the future land use and zoning, and that if you should decide to approve this, there is a condition at the bottom of your staff report outlining some of the technical zoning code compliance issues that we would have to get this up to standard as a planned development. So consider that if you choose.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll hear from the applicant next.
Yes, David Ellison on behalf of the applicant. We would have requested this be tabled. We received staff comments and we appeared before you all back in December or November, I believe. We met with some of the stakeholders and neighbors, community since then. We want to revisit the site plan of the project in general. And so we would just request that y'all allow us to table this for a later date. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Or in opposition? Okay, great. We'll start with our discussion. Lucy?
All right, this has already been tabled once?
No, it was withdrawn and this is.
Withdrawn, okay, okay. I wanted to be sure because I know I've seen it at least once before and I know I voted on it. I will go ahead and move to table, but I have a lot of concerns about this. And the one that I'm going to bring up, number one, is I learned decades ago, you don't mess around with your industrial zones. You don't start eroding your industrial zones because, and especially in Athens-Clarke County, which is the smallest county in the state, and also because so much of our land is held by federal, state, and local government. And we don't have that big an industrial zone. We'll make that clear.
Joey?
She made a motion to
Oh,
table.
did you?
Was that a motion?
Yeah, I made a motion to table.
Okay.
I'll second her motion.
Would anyone else like to comment or question?
I have a question on what the consequences of the table versus the denial are from staff.
I mean, the only difference would be that it allows them to go back, make modifications, and then bring it back through under this current application. A denial, at this point would move it forward to the mayor and commission, and then it would require them to withdraw, and resubmit again. Which they could do either one, but it just, a table to make changes at this point would allow them to do it under the current application. That's really the only difference. And then new applicant, they're going to submit new stuff anyway when they bring in their changes, but it would be a new application, new fees.
Anyone else? Person?
I mean, I'll support a table, but I'll just say I will not support residential on this property. So I don't think that's just putting it out there.
Anyone else?
I have that same comment.
Okay.
I guess I'll just add then, I'll support the table, and I have concerns about residential on this property, although I'm not willing to say that I wouldn't support it, but I totally, generally am sympathetic to the opinion Lucy expressed about protecting industrial land. I do have questions about why this hasn't been developed as industrial land yet, and it's right on the loop. And so, I guess I might be persuadable, but I think I would just encourage the applicant to talk to the economic development folks in our county about, because we've heard in the past and earlier iterations of this project from them that they would be concerned about residential development on this parcel. And if that's still true, then I would also very likely oppose a residential rezone. But if you can bring them on board with some version of this, then I'm open to considering.
I think we just vote on the motion. Do you all think we need a roll call vote, or what do you think?
I don't think so.
Okay, all in favor of the motion to table, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next, 1535 Commerce Road.
Good evening. This is 1545 Commerce Road. Next slide, please. The request is to rezone part of the property from industrial, the property right now is split zoned between industrial and commercial general. The applicant has requested to rezone the entire property to industrial. This would also require, since the property is split in the future land use as well, to change the future land use from employment center and general business to just employment center. The applicant has proposed their concept for a 100,000 square foot building. This is proposed to be a light industrial, perhaps a distribution type of industrial use. Again, this is a straight rezone. There's no binding plan here. They have, parking spaces on one side of the building for workers, and then they have bays for trucks on the other side. There are development conditions this time. because as I'm about to tell you, there was a nearly identical request here that was recommended for denial by this body in September of 2022. They have responded by adding some conditions. Those conditions have been noted in your staff report. Next slide, please. This is the property. It's going up 441 here, and this is Sandy Creek Nature Center on the bottom. These are some light industrial uses. This whole corridor generally was zoned commercial general back and is still zoned that way, even though there are residential uses here. Those properties are zoned CG, and then there's a small neighborhood, residential neighborhood up here. As you can see, the property itself is undeveloped. Next slide. Here's what we were talking about with the zoning or the future land use. You can see that we have employment on this half of the parcel, and then it extends across the street. You have CG going up Commerce Road for general business. And that would change then to extend the employment out to cover the rest of the parcel. And then below that is the Sandy Creek. As you can see, it's government, which is the parking. Similar story here. We have just with the zoning, we have I zoning, and then we have CG zoning going up the highway here. And their request is to go to full I, and then you have the park zoning below it. So this is the concept that they have presented to us. Large 100,000 square foot warehouse. There's the parking for employees on the top here. This is the truck bay. It faces the nature center. They would have entrances on 441 and on Old Commerce Road. So yeah, that's there. We would note that this is non-binding. So this is just a concept. Please. Our staff recommendation is basically the same as it was the last time they came through. We think it's inconsistent with the 2018 comprehensive plan, which calls for smaller scale employment uses like on these industrial and industrial and CG kinds of sites when they are close to other sensitive uses such as residential, which is adjacent here, and sensitive environmental resources. And so we don't necessarily have a problem as the property is currently zoned with the I on there. We don't have a problem with a smaller scale industrial use going there. It is the large scale proposal here that concerns us. And the comprehensive plan also calls for reuse and redevelopment of industrial sites. This would be a greenfield, brand new development. And you know, the comprehensive plan also calls to protect our environmental resources. This is one of the perhaps premier ones, one of the premier ones in the county. And the comp plan also calls for nodal development rather than kind of a strip development, in which case you would be a strip development here along 441. We'd probably be looking for a nodal one that's closer to some other uses that can complement. We also would say that the applicant has not really demonstrated why the existing zoning is unworkable. Obviously, it can't fit 100,000 square foot building there, but could that CG or that I part, half of those parcels fit smaller scale uses that might be a better fit for the neighborhood? Again, we are concerned primarily that the scale of the project could have a detrimental impact on the nature center and nearby residents. Leisure Services has provided extensive comments to that effect. They are concerned about its impact. Staff supports the applicant's conditions. There are 6 conditions that they have offered to try and offset some of these concerns, but we think that they are insufficient to address our concerns and this from other departments. And so we've added some of our own conditions. There are 4 conditions of our own that we've also added. And furthermore, Transportation and Public Works has stated that they really can't support this project right now because they don't know what kind of impact it's going to have on the surrounding road network. Either you have, truck traffic on 441, and then on Old Commerce Road, there's potential that that road may not be sufficiently built up to handle large trucks. If you choose to recommend approval, staff recommends including or considering the 10 conditions that are listed in the staff report. There are 6 from the applicant, 4 from staff. But right now, as staff, we are recommending denial to both future land use and the zoning. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you. So we'll hear from the applicant next.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. My name is Bo Terrell. I'm at 395 Village Circle. My family and I moved to Athens about 8 or 9 months ago from Atlanta. I'm a partner at Highgate Partners, a full-service commercial real estate company based in Atlanta. Upon us moving, we moved about 50% of the company and opened up a secondary office in Athens. Our first deal in Athens was about 45 days ago when we purchased 740 Prince Avenue. It's a 12-building medical office park on about 4 acres where Millage intersects with Prince. I'm here today to talk about 1545 Commerce Road. We bought this tract with a mindset to help facilitate the lack of industrial product that Athens has currently, especially around the perimeter. Some numbers to give y'all today that I think blew my mind, and you probably know these better than me, but currently Athens has about 9.9 million square feet of industrial product on the ground. Of that, the vacancy rate is 0.9%. That equates to a total vacancy of 89,100 square feet. Of those numbers, the logistics side, the vacancy is only 0.2% or 19,800 square feet. There's currently about 130,000 square feet of product to be delivered in the next 12 to 18 months, only moving the needle by about 1.3%. That said, Athens being a growing city, a hub of Atlanta, commerce is looked at least on the real estate side. You have to have storage, you have to have distribution, and industrial is a key component of that. With a 0.9% vacancy rate, we were mindful of putting it in a place that we thought would not only work best for business, but cognizant of you're only as good as your last deal. Being a small town of Athens, I didn't want to move here and upset people. In fact, I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old that my wife on nice days or nice Saturdays, Sundays, take to the park, Sandy Creek. We have been going back and forth and we've been very mindful and we appreciate everyone's input. And hopefully by some of the suggestions that we're going to speak of tonight, you can see that we're taking all those considerations for the most part and putting it into our plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And would anyone like to speak in favor of the project?
Logan Waters, 22 Barnett Shoals Road. I'm with Due South Engineering here on behalf of the applicant. And I really just want to touch on a couple points, really from the staff recommendation. I'll try to be brief. There were several things that we want to discuss. We thought, first I want to clarify that when we originally submitted, we withdrew it. So it wasn't denied by you. It was actually, we received denial recommendation from zoning, decided to table it ourselves so that we could go back and speak with staff and in a good faith effort actually come forward with some of these proffered conditions. I think it was the 6 conditions that Stephen mentioned. But I kind of want to go through a couple of items on the staff report and just how we really thought that, one, our plan addresses that, and 2, how some of the conditions that we have actually helped out address that. The first thing is that the distribution center and light industrial wasn't really compatible with the future land use change of commercial general. The general business. The commercial general, which is an acceptable zoning in that future land use, does allow for light distribution warehouses, which is what we have tentatively put forward now as a possible end use of this property. As far as the compatibility with the comprehensive plan, several things were mentioned in the staff report. One, create nodal development. We're right there at 441. The Athens Loop is a half mile away. This is an industrial and commercial corridor. Now, that's why the properties adjacent to it are zoned industrial. All we're asking is that that front parcel be also zoned industrial. That really helps out with the end user. It's very difficult. It limits us greatly on what end user can be on that property if we have to find a use that is allowed in both commercial business or commercial general and industrial. Let's see. I want to discuss some of the other points I mentioned in the staff report.
There are some differences between commercial general and industrial as far as the intensity that's allowed. But if we put those in numbers just for reference, it's only 4.74 acres of a total 8.8 parcel site that we're asking to redevelop. So, commercial general allows 80% max coverage compared to 95% for industrial. That comes out to 0.7 acres. That's roughly 175-foot square box. It's really not as much as it sounds like it's a lot, but it's really not. And if we look at the 10% conserved canopy compared to 0%, that is 0.47 acres. It's really minimal in the grand scheme of things, especially when what we're trying to do is make this project something that, will benefit the city, will benefit the surrounding properties as much as possible right now. And that was really the point of us proffering some of these conditions. Leisure services had a lot of concerns with light pollution, noise. I think stormwater was one as well. From a light pollution standpoint, Athens has ordinances in place right now we have to provide a lighting plan and only so many foot candles can leave the property. We're not asking for any waivers. We actually offered to install a fence to help shield some of that ambient light as well as the loading dock from that area. And I'd also like to point out that with the existing zoning, these conditions that we're offering don't have to be applied. Someone could put their entrance on Nature Center Road and have a storefront, any kind of security lighting going right into the Nature Center. And I know the Nature Center, it is a very nice place. We're trying to do our best to protect it while still being practical. And that was part of the reason of offering these conditions. So I do want to go through those 6 conditions. Any way we can pull that up? I got them right here. All right. So the first thing we did was we offered to install an opaque fence around the truck dock area. Granted, this isn't a binding site plan. More than likely, when this site is designed, if there is a loading dock, it's going to have to be on that side because of the existing topography. So we offered to put up an opaque fence that would help shield some of the light as well as screen some of the noise. We also agreed to that we would not put an access point on Nature Center Road. This allows for, any truck traffic that's coming in is going to be concentrated either to 441 North or to the Old Commerce Road. Leisure Services, they explained to us in our meeting that they had spent a lot of money and time in managing the forest appropriately and removing invasive species. So a solution that we thought of that we could give would be any street trees that we plant would be native to the Athens-Clarke County area. That way there's no worries about any kind of species spreading there and upsetting any work they've done previously. We also put forth several prohibited uses should this rezoning be successful. These were ones that were obvious in the industrial category that would not be desirable at all from the park standpoint and, really from any adjoining properties as well. Some of these are a kennel, slaughterhouse, any kind of mining operation, a junkyard, asphalt plant. These are things that we're just volunteering that we won't use or that will not be in end use. We said we would install signs to say no parking on Nature Center Road. It was brought to our attention that trucks parking there overnight has been an issue. As far as we can enforce that, we're very limited, but we offer to put up signs. Any tenant, they would hopefully discourage their employees from doing that. And then we also offered to do a transportation impact analysis with Clarke County, according to Clarke County standards. And that actually goes to, I know transportation had a comment about not knowing what the end use would be, so it's hard to support it. We're offering to do a transportation impact analysis where we're going to abide by whatever that says at the end. We're not trying to pull a fast one in that regard. I will say regarding their other comment about Old Commerce Road possibly not being sufficient. That's, there's existing Old Commerce Road, if you remember from the zoning map, actually serves those industrial properties. I think it's very reasonable to assume that as those are developed, there's going to be truck traffic. So our request isn't creating a problem if there actually is a problem there. So we feel that, that isn't really a fair consideration for us. Let's see.
About 10 more seconds.
10 more seconds. All right, I would like to talk about the staff conditions. The 50-foot buffer that staff recommended, that's 15% of properties with it. We have almost 40 feet of fall across our site. There's absolutely no way that we can do that. And I'd also like to point out that's not applicable to a CG or an industrial zoning. And several of the other ones that they're requesting it actually matches a CG zoning that's directly in opposition to what we're requesting to do. And I'd like to point out that, while this may not be the ideal scenario, we're trying to work in good faith now to put forth the best option for development that benefits both us and the county versus someone else coming in and putting in a Dollar General or a dog kennel or whatever else they can think of. So, do you have any questions? Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this application? And in opposition to the application? Is there somebody else who wants? Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm Emily Carr. I live at 805 Forest Heights Drive. I'm also the president of Sandy Creek Nature Center Incorporated. We are the organization that 50 years ago formed and raised the money, bought the property, built the first buildings at the Nature Center, ran the programs until we handed it over to the county to do. But we have continued to support the Nature Center. Our mission is to support, promote, and protect both the environmental education and the preservation efforts there at the Nature Center. We're concerned about the visitor quality of the, visiting the Nature Center with this right across the street from us. We want to work with whatever goes in. We know something will be there, but we are concerned about how this will impact our visitors and how it will impact the habitat as well. We do have night programs, so and there are animals that live there all night long. So they're influenced by the light that will be shining down there. We're worried about traffic, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you've gone to the Nature Center, if you come from the bypass, you have to get over into a turn lane, and you have to be very careful because at least once a month when I'm doing that, someone decides to use the turn lane as a passing lane coming down 441. We have school buses that are coming there. We have camps in the summertime for 6 weeks. So parents are dropping off and picking up children. And the parking lot there is full all the time because if you're not coming to the Nature Center, you're going to the Greenway. So we're very concerned about that as well. And with the Old Commerce Road, we find that a lot of people they bike, they run or walk down the Greenway, and then they keep going up Old Commerce and back. Now, they would not be able to do that with the traffic that we have there, that would be there. The Nature Center is a special place. It's not just a park. You can go to Bishop Park and you do not expect the same kind of habitat there. You don't expect a natural experience at Bishop Park, but when you come to the Nature Center, that's what you expect. Many people think it's just the building, but it's not. It's all that over 200 acres of land and the 5 miles of trails that people enjoy and use. And we want to be sure that we can protect that, the place and the experience of going to the Nature Center. So we're very concerned about this development. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll start with our discussion. Would anyone like to kick us off? Joey?
Yeah, I'll start. And I want to, of course, hear everybody's opinions on the development. I was just listening to opposition and I want to kind of understand. I know it was brought about light shining across. It was brought about traffic. It was What about bicycles on the Old Commerce Road? But all these things, to me, I mean, it's already zoned general business and employment. So by right, there would be like a Dollar General could be put up front or whatever with, you know, the light's gonna be there, the traffic's gonna be there. So I don't know if this is the right development to go there, but there's a lot of stuff that's gonna be there regardless of how it's developed. So I'm just trying to figure out what's the best use for this land. Because I look at Commerce Road and the road out to the interstate, that is how you want your industrial companies want the 4-lane roads, easy access. They want to get it in and out. That is what they want. You know, I look at our industrial on the east side. Well, it's got to get out to the loop, to go around the loop, to find the 4-lane road to get out. Well, more than likely, it's going to go around the loop to find 441 to head out of town. So that is, you know, I look at a facility like this, it kind of makes sense to me, but you know, want to hear other, just because looking at zoning, there's something can go there. Industrial can go in the back and general can go up front. So,
Yeah, have you ever worked at a warehouse?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that there is an experience of working in a warehouse that like gives you that makes it really real, which I just want to try to explain a little bit. Because I hear what you're saying and what the applicant's saying, and God knows I hate Dollar General, because they like seriously mistreat their employees. The land use of a Dollar General in terms of light, noise, traffic, everything is incredibly different to that of a warehouse. You know, if you have an employment center warehouse, you have, I don't know how many parking spaces they showed there, dozens of people coming in, going out. If you're running 3 shifts, you have that happening, you know, multiple times a day, in addition to distribution trucks coming in and out. The amount of traffic generated by those 2 different uses is just astronomically different. Also, if you're looking at warehouse, you're looking at 3rd shift, you're looking at a lot of late night, big traffic pushes. And so I thought that staff's explanation of this was really solid. There is a part of this parcel that is already zoned industrial, that will not fit something as big as what the applicant wants to produce. And there is a commercial zoning, which will also not produce something as big as the applicant wants to produce. And the scale and size of this is what it makes sense for where it is located, right next to the nature center. So this is one instance in which it seems to me that the zoning that exists makes sense and is there for a reason. And I haven't really heard from the applicant why this parcel specifically really needs to be fully industrial for a large warehouse distribution center, especially when we have, I mean, I looked it up because I was curious. Y'all were a couple years too late to get that 505 Olympic Drive in the existing employment center, but there is so much land out there. There doesn't seem to be a significant shortage of places where you could put a warehouse that we have already designated as employment centers, including areas along Commerce Road. You know, it sounds like this was, do y'all have a tenant lined up?
Can I address some of your questions?
Absolutely, I would love to hear it.
Have to formally come up here or not is what you're talking about. My name is Nathan Wong. I'm an associate of Bo Terrell's.
To answer a couple of your questions, one of the reasons why we're asking for this rezoning is a lot of the coverage requirements that are changed because, specifically for like this, the warehouse that was proposed, and we have different diagrams that we can probably share too. It's specifically of a distribution use. So there's, very little, if at all, manufacturing that's produced there.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I'm sorry to, I understand why you want this rezoning for this parcel, because this is the parcel you have, and the thing you want to build is a warehouse that doesn't fit the current zoning.
So
Real quick, I just want to make real clear that what you can do at this point is answer questions,
okay.
but you kind of can't come up and sort of argue your case from the
Sure.
start. So
Sure. I thought she was asking why we, the applicant, wanted to rezone, and I was trying to address that.
Yeah. So continue. I just want to sort of.
Yes, I guess for a specific question that I would like to hear if you have an answer is, why does this parcel, not why do you want to rezone it? Because you want to build the thing that you want to build. Why do you have to build that here? Why could it not be, why did you not buy land that was already zoned for this?
Say Olympia Drive.
Any.
So specifically for a distribution use and logistics tenants, they are always very focused, hyper-focused on the most efficient way to move product in and out. And so the unfortunate side of the Olympia Drive side, the east side of Athens, is you're adding time, and time for all these logistics users and tenants that we've talked to is money. And so it's a little cost prohibitive to put this particular building over on the east side of town. I'm not saying that you can't put an industrial building, but it's probably more of a manufacturing use, which you guys have discussed earlier, where they don't want to be around anything because they're making a lot of noise. Well, if you stick an OEM on the east side of town, that is a totally different type of end user than what we're looking, that can go in this type of building, which requires the logistical access to 85 to get to Atlanta or out to the Carolinas or into Athens.
And there's no industrial zoning along 441 right now.
Outside of what is currently
None
there,
available.
then I am unaware of that.
Okay.
Until you get to probably Brazelton.
Rip.
Or what's up?
Commerce.
Commerce.
Yeah, there's a ton.
But you'd have to get up to Commerce to do that.
The entire parcel was zoned industrial at one time.
Okay.
So I'm
Do you have any
generally,
questions for the applicant, or can he say?
I will have a
Okay.
question for the applicant. I don't want to keep you on your feet though. Feel free to,
May I?
if you want, of course, stand or sit as you prefer. So I'm generally leery of strict B-zones where we don't know for sure what we're getting. And I appreciate the condition that tries to address that, saying we're not going to do an asphalt plant or with other things like a slaughterhouse. Like, great, that's good. I'm for not doing a slaughterhouse next to Sandy Creek Park. So I appreciate the forbid certain uses. And I take that to be like a good faith effort. Something that would make me feel better about, like, you guys want to do a distribution center there, maybe, right? But there's a couple dozen other uses that are allowed in an industrial zone that are not prohibited by your proposed condition. And that might not be a distribution center, and that the nice people who manage Sandy Creek Park might be especially concerned about, not to mention the animals that live there and the children that go there to enjoy it and other members of the community. So I'm generally leery of straight rezones where we're not sure what we're going to get. And that's why, like, the PD process enables an applicant to come in and say, this is, if you approve this, this is what you get. And it's easier to evaluate that. And a sensitive area like next door to Sandy Creek Park makes me it accentuates that concern. It makes me that much more concerned about a straight rezone as opposed to a PD. So I'm just putting that out there for you. I also had a question for the applicant, which is commercial general allows distribution center as a use. And so I wonder why you need the rezone if what's going to be there is a distribution center. Maybe you can enlighten us on that.
Sure. Talk about the septic slope.
Sure. So can we flip to the site plan, please? Specifically, it comes down to coverage to maximally utilize the site as a whole. And so from the left to right, you're going to see a gradual slope, which is why the detention pond has to be where it is.
and why the septic field has to be where that is. And so, everything from where the parking lot is to where the truck court is has been laid out to not just optimize the amount of parking or the truck docks or everything, but it's to maximize the coverage, which is why we're asking for the rezone. But it's also to kind of maximize the topography, which we can't really control.
When you say maximize the coverage, I'm just looking at 9-10-3 in our ordinances, which says commercial general allows floor area ratio of 1.5 and lot coverage of 80, whereas industrial allows lot coverage of 95. So it's just that difference. You're allowed to cover 95% of the portion that's already industrial.
Right.
And 80% of the portion that is currently commercial general, and you want to bump that half that's commercial general up from 80 to 95.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
That 15% correlates to the 0.7 acres of additional coverage that we're allowed. We rezone from commercial general to industrial.
Okay.
And regardless of the size of the building, in order to the trucks to turn around, you need the.
Okay, could you do it could you do a 90,000 or an 80,000 square foot warehouse with the current zoning? Because distribution center is allowed in both of these zones. And so does it just scale down the size of your warehouse? And I hear you that you got 10 million feet of warehouse and 2% are vacant, but
If I can address that specific question, within the distribution sphere of buildings, you generally see a significant drop off, not just in property economics, but in tenant demand for buildings that are under 100,000 feet. So 100,000 feet, although it may sound like a giant building, Amazon's building
Yeah.
1 million square feet.
You guys are trying to track Amazon or type of thing.
No.
Specifically.
No. We actually don't want Amazon, nor would they be interested in a building this small. But all that being said is a user that optimally is trying to do that end use now with all the power racking and the logistics of the volume that's necessary, typically is going to require a minimum of 100,000 feet. If that answers your.
Thank you.
Okay. Kristen?
Thank you.
So I guess just for our general purposes, we're talking about a warehouse, but we're not talking about a warehouse. Like we're talking about rezoning property to whatever might happen to it. As someone who has sat in the line of cars of parents waiting to pick up their kids from Sandy Creek Nature Center from the park, from the summer camp, I like to think that, so I'm looking at it from this perspective of, we talk about like, we have residential areas, we wouldn't put like a super industrial commercial thing next to a neighborhood. We like to have these buffers. And I also like to think, with a community asset like Sandy Creek Nature Center, we would also think about having businesses near Sandy Creek Nature Center that maybe buffer it, or at least add to the amenities. I mean, just off the top of my head, like, there could be, a climbing gym that could go there. That could be a nice, like, complement to the uses that are already in place in that. I mean, I'm not talking about whatever, like, not to go down this tangent, but like, my point is just to fit a thing here because we can, we have such a gem in the nature center, and to not have a tenant that would also consider that as part of their surroundings and perhaps as an asset to what they do as well, just seems like a lost opportunity. So I'm hesitant to do a straight rezone to begin with, and I also hesitate to not know what goes next to this gem that we have for our community for the future.
Would anyone like to make a motion on the future land use map item?
I'll make a motion.
Is that cutting anyone off, or does anyone like to discuss? Okay, go for it.
I would like to make a motion for denial.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so that stops the voting. Is that correct? We only.
So because we're sending forward recommendations on both of them regardless, go ahead and vote on both of them.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the rezone request? Or would anyone like to make a motion?
Motion to recommend denial of the zoning request.
Second.
Okay, and Monique second. Okay, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay. So, Brad, do you have any report to add?
Have no report this evening. The commission does not act on zoning at their January meeting. So the one item from last month, which is the mall rezoning, will go forward with the items acted on this evening. February voting. That's all I have.
Any miscellaneous announcements?
So move.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.